Hey guys, this is Grant Sasser, Gridiron Football. I'm here joined by our guest co-host for tonight, Jerit Roser of Louisiana for all y'all. Jace unfortunately can't make it on the Zoom. He's vacationing with his family in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and they also got some great news that Jace's little sister Jamie got proposed to by her boyfriend last night. So a lot of great news all around this Thanksgiving weekend, but down here we got football, and that's always good news to hear, Jared. So, what are your thoughts so far about the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, congrats to Jace and the family. And, on our end, I think we're really now getting to a point in the playoffs where the matchups and the intensity and all those things are really noticeably ratcheting up in terms of just matchups that I think we're intrigued by, potential state championship caliber matchups. When you see games like Catholic and Curtis as a quarterfinal, or Zachary and Destrehan as a quarterfinal, St. James and Manny, there are some great matchups in all of these brackets and all over the state. And so as folks kind of shake back from Thanksgiving dinner, it's going to be a lot of fun on football Friday night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's get started. So in Division One non-select, we have Rustin and Walker. Mandeville, who's been one of the Cinderella teams so far in this playoffs, they will play the number 4 seed Airline. Destrehan and Zachary, that's always going to be a guaranteed in the Louisiana playoffs because I think this is like, I mean, they've played each other so many times. I forget how many times in the last few years that they played each other. I mean, it's always going to be a great game. And then you have Dutchtown and Central. So, Jared, there's a lot of great matches. I have Rustin and Airline and Dutcherhand and Central play each other in the semifinals. Who do you have going to the semifinals out of this bracket?
Yeah, I could certainly see all of those playing out that way. As much fun as it is to see Walker make its first ever quarterfinal appearance, Rustin is a team that has felt like it's been on a mission all year long, and so I think they advance as well. That Airline and Mandeville game is one I'm really torn on, kind of a clash of styles. And I'm kind of starting to lean toward Mandeville to pull yet another upset and push this thing on to the semis with Nate Shepard and company for the Skippers, making the long trip up there to face Airline. I was really torn going into the playoffs on Destrehan Zachary and took Destrehan, and I'm going to stick with that for the Wildcats to get back to the semifinals yet again. And then that Baton Rouge matchup all the way at the bottom, I think is a lot of fun. I think Central Wildcats woke up some folks around the state by going up to Neville and winning, but that maybe some people still don't realize how capable that team is of continuing to push this thing farther, maybe even a couple more weeks. And, I kind of like the way they're playing. I think they're peaking at the right time under first year head coach back at Central, at least, David Simino. And so I'm taking the Wildcats to advance and get on to the semis.
Yeah, and the thing about these quarterfinals is like it's I expect Rustin to go back to the semifinals because Walker's another very good defensive team, but those type of matchups benefit Rustin because of how well they are defensively, and then offense they've proven that they can score points. Airline, I have Airline winning it, but in a close game because I think Mandeville has a fantastic rushing attack led by Nate Shepard, who's one of the top prospects in the state out of the class of 2025. And I think they'll make it interesting to keep the ball away from Airline, who's scoring about 45 points a game. But I liked Airline just because I think their pass attack may be a little bit too much for Mandeville. I don't think Mandeville's really seen a team like that all year, so I expect Airline to win that game. Like you said, I think I'm sticking with Destrehan. Even though I'm not sure if Coach Scott's coming back because I know he recently had surgery, but I still think Destrehan has enough talent, and I think they have the edge offensively to win this game. And also picking Central to beat Dutchtown. Even though it's a road game for Central, they're both in the Baton Rouge area, so it's not as far as a trek. And they actually traveled pretty well to East St. John. I was there at that game, so I expect the Central community to be out there in full force, and I expect Central to beat Dutchtown. And probably should be a very low scoring game because they're both really good defensive teams and they both like to run the ball. Moving on to Division One select, you have the first seed Holy Cross going up against a very tough Acadiana team. You have Carr going up against Alexandria. and Alexandria defeated the 4 seed Brother Martin last week. So they have a lot of hype coming into this game. You have Catholic and John Curtis, as you mentioned earlier. That's probably the biggest game we have in the state. That's coming up this Friday, and then you have St. Paul's and Archbishop Rummel, and that should be an interesting one as well. Archbishop Rummel has really shocked some people, even though we always knew they were talented. They kind of sputtered throughout the season. That the 1 week they'll be U high, and then the next week they'll get blown up by like 3 or 4 touchdowns by Archbishop Shaw. So, what do you see out of these 4 matches, and who are you taking?
Yeah, I think they're great matchups. I do agree that Catholic and Curtis, to me, is the biggest matchup in the state on Friday night, but I think anyone that finds themselves at any of these games is in for a potential treat. I think that Holy Cross and Acadiana game where the DeBetta brothers' grandfather is actually a Holy Cross Hall of Famer is kind of an interesting matchup to see those two find each other in the quarterfinals, and they'll play at Southeastern on Saturday. So I'm going to get a chance to hightail it from Tiger Stadium out to Strawberry to go see them on Saturday night because of that scheduling dynamic. And I could see that one going either way. I'm starting to lean a little bit towards Acadiana, watching the way that they're coming together late in the season. I think Alexandria probably has more of a chance against Carr than people are going to give him credit for, but I'm sticking with Carr to advance. Carr is a team that I've looked at among that top tier of teams in the state all year long. Catholic and Curtis is one that I have been most torn about throughout the playoffs. And I took Curtis. I'm going to stick with that. I don't feel overly confident about it. I could see it going either way. And St. Aug gave Curtis everything they could have wanted in the second round, made me a little nervous about Curtis now having to come up to Baton Rouge and face Catholic as far as my picks are concerned. And then I had this St. Paul's and Rummel matchup in the quarters, and I took Rummel to advance to the semis, and I'm going to stick with that. They're a team that can play with anyone on any given night. We've seen it on their best nights all season, and I think they're playing some of their best football right now. They've gone up to Shreveport back-to-back weeks and beaten 2 good teams, and so going to the North Shore is not going to scare them at all.
Yeah, and I think I pretty much agree with you there for the most part. Well, did you say Holy Cross was going to beat Acadiana?
I'm leaning Acadiana.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's probably the only one we probably disagree on. But I have the Holy Cross beating Acadiana, but barely. I think Holy Cross. I think they're not. They've seen the Veer before because obviously they played John Curtis earlier this year and they beat John Curtis. So they're not going to be unfamiliar with Acadiana's offense. But I think Acadiana will make it interesting because the key to beat Holy Cross is to keep the ball away from that offense that's led by Cole Canatella and Kobe Young and Cross Johnson and Derek Johnson. Don't forget about Thin Martin, too, who's their 4th receiver, who's a pretty good receiver as well. And then they also have a pretty good rushing attack led by Karine Smith and Caden Ando. So they have a deep offensive talent. So I expect that game to be close, but I expect Holy Cross to win. Rummel will have to go into the semifinals. I have Curtis actually win that game because Catholic. I think Curtis is on a tear right now, even though they had a tough matchup against St. Aug. But St. Aug, every year, they'll have that second round game where they'll somehow almost beat Rummel or John Curtis. They're weird. Like all year they'll be inconsistent, but then the second round they look like the best team in the state. But that didn't really shock me all that much. But I expect Curtis to beat Catholic because I think right now they're on a tear, and I think the LSA pissed them off about the whole. Yeah, we're going to take away the wins from JT Curtis, and I'm just also not going to bet against JT Curtis. It's hard to do. But yeah, they also expect Carr to be Alexandria. Moving on to Division II non-select. You have North DeSoto and Iowa, Opelousas and Lutcher, Assumption and Northwest, and Jennings and Cecilia. North DeSoto and Iowa, that's a rematch of last year's semifinal game from the year before. Iowa was actually the 1st seed, and then North DeSoto was the 4th seed, and they ended up beating them. Opelousas and Lutcher, I think that's a very interesting game because Opelousas is one of the more talented teams in the state, and they're going up to play Lutcher in Lutcher, and they're the defending Division II non-select state champions. Assumption is the 3rd seed, and they have a great rushing attack led by Reese Turner and Chase Jacobs. So they also have a very fantastic defense led by Alfred Kennedy and Brody Robichaux. And they're going against a very tough Northwest team that has shocked the state, beating Franklin Parish and Wassman back to back. And yes, Jennings and Cecilia. And that's a very interesting matchup because they're next door neighbors essentially. So, what do you have to say about these matchups, Jared, and who do you have to win?
Yeah, yeah, you hit on some of what I'm looking at with a rematch of a semifinal last year, and some short trips for a couple of teams to take and things of that nature. I had North DeSoto versus Iowa in these quarters to start the playoffs, and I went North DeSoto. I'm sticking with that for the Griffins to advance yet again and get to the semis. I had this Lutcher and Opelousas matchup, and I'm sticking with Lutcher, as I predicted before the playoffs, to advance and then give us a rematch of last year's state title game in this year's semis. On the bottom half, Northwest has been the biggest surprise to me personally to be here in the quarters. They're playing really well right now and have a great rushing attack in their own right, and defensive standouts led by Devon Thibodeau and company. But I like Assumption to advance. And then Cecilia and Jennings, a couple teams that I like a lot. Jennings is a team that we've seen as a lower seed make some deep runs in past years. And so not shocked to see them as a 10 seed here in the quarters, but Cecilia and their depth of versatile athletes. Diesel Solari is kind of the face of all that, the headliner, the Prez is kind of his nickname, but they've got a lot of guys that can make plays on both sides of the ball. And I like Cecilia at home to advance, keep on pushing this thing deeper into the playoffs.
Yeah, and I think I really like North Dakota. I expect them to go to the semifinals again and beat Iowa in a rematch from last year. I'm actually like Opelousas to win over Lutcher. I think they have a lot of talent, and I'm not really as high as Lutcher as I was the year before, just because they're not nearly as explosive as they were on offense. And one of the big reasons why they were able to go as far as they did and win the whole thing was because of Dewanye Lunch Winfield, and he was a fantastic player, and he's now at UL doing his thing. But I don't think they had that explosive as offense before. And you going up against a team like Opelousas, who's extremely talented, they need explosiveness, and they really haven't shown that this year. They lost. They lost against St. Charles, and they lost against Assumption. They're both really good teams, but you could tell if they had that explosion in offense, they probably would have won both those games. But and then so I have Assumption being Northwest. I expect them to go to the semifinals. I'm always going to be high on Assumption. Coach Broussard's done a fantastic job over there, and Reese Turner, like I said, Reese Turner and Chase Jacobs are just a two-headed monster. It's hard to defend against them. And then also, I think I'm taking Cecilia to beat Jennings. I think this game is going to be very close. Like I said earlier, they're next door neighbors, so it's going to be packed house over the Cecilia. So I think that's going to be one of the better games in this playoffs. But moving on to Division Two select, there's a lot of great matchups in this one too. St. Thomas More will play St. Michael the Archangel. St. Michael the Archangel actually won their first playoff game ever in program history against Livingston College. So they're pretty hyped going into this game. But that's St. Thomas More has been one of the better programs in the state for the last 5 to 10 years. We have a real juggernaut matchup between Archbishop Shaw and JFK, two fantastic coaches. Hank Tarrant is a Hall of Fame coach. JFK is led by Linares Elpage, who it was a great player at Tulane. Matter of fact, he actually played for my dad at Tulane, and he's done a fantastic job leading this JFK team because when he took over, they only like 18 to 20 players. And then now they have a team of like 40 to 50 players, and they one of the more talented teams in the state. You have Lafayette Christian versus McDonald 35. Lafayette Christian obviously led by Juwan Johnson. He has a chance to break the all-time total offensive yards record. And then you have Trillians Catholic and Edie White, and that's a very interesting matchup, Jared. So what do you have to say about all four of these matchups and who you're taking to go in the semifinals?
Yeah, I think a couple of these matchups, it's going to be tough for the underdogs to keep up with some really high-powered and elite level teams around the state and really I'm talking about that STM and LCA duo that we've looked at among the top teams in the state in any classification. And so great for Coach Leger and company to get that first win in St. Michael history, but it's going to be tough to go into Lafayette and beat the Cougars and keep pushing this thing forward for them. I think on the bottom half, LCA is a team that is driven by falling just short to STM a year ago, and now they have some extra fuel seeing how close Jawan is to some of those records. And so we may see some crazy numbers put up by LCA this week and potentially the next couple. Next week's semifinal could be interesting, but he's starting to get real close to both total offensive yards as a career record and total touchdowns. I think he's just 10 shy of that one. So we could see both of those realistically before they even get to the Dome. Expect a big night for him against McDonough 35 to advance. And I'm a little bit more torn about the other two. I think Archbishop Shaw and JFK is my favorite matchup in terms of could go either way in this bracket. You talked a lot about that JFK team and kind of building the depth out. Folks know they have BB Causey, the senior prospect, but they've got Division I talent in each of those classes as well. But this Shaw team under Hank Tierney, revitalizing everything on the West Bank, back to his heyday and his first stint over at Archbishop Shaw. I have liked them to get to the semis, and I'm sticking with that pick for them to go across the river, go to Pan Am and bring home victory. They came back in a game that you watched last week against Evangel in impressive fashion, and so I think they can kind of build off of that second half momentum there. And then all the way down at the bottom, that Turlings and Edie White matchup is an interesting one to me, but I'm going to stick with an Edie White team that has been so good the last few years, and I think this year is more balanced than they've been throughout this recent resurgence back to, state title hopefuls. And so I have them advancing and getting to host a semifinal next weekend.
Yeah, kind of pigtailing off of that, Edie White, Edie White's a fantastic team. I expect them to beat Turlings, but that game's going to be really close. Edie White, they've been fantastic. They've been one of the better teams in the state the last 5 years, even though they come up short in terms of winning the state title. They've always been knocking on the door the last 5 years. They're led by Jeffrey Diedrich, who's a fantastic fullback. Then you have Paxton LaFont, who's a fantastic receiver in his own right, who has recently committed to Nichols. I think it was like last week he committed to Nichols. So they have some talent on that team, but Turlings is a team you should watch out for as well. They returned Preston Welch, who's been a fantastic quarterback for them the last 3 or 4 years, and they have Aiden Trahan at running back, and they have some fantastic receivers as well. But I expect Edie White to win that game. Shaw, it's great to see them back after the last – I mean, you got to think about this. The last time they went to back-to-back quarterfinals was 2007, 2008, that was in the stretch where they went to 3 straight state titles under then head coach Scott Bonchfather. But Hank Tierney's came back. He's completely revitalized that school. The head master over there, Father Ryan, has done a fantastic job. Just not only revitalizing the school, but bringing back Hank Tierney to kind of bring back that magic. And you're seeing that pay off. Their enrollment has gone up. The community's back in full force supporting their team. I was over there for the Evangel game. They had a packed house over there, and you saw a bunch of alumni. Marlon Favorite was over there. He played for Tierney at both Shaw and West Jeff, so he showed a lot of love to Coach Tierney over there. So they've done a fantastic job revitalizing the program. But I think Shaw's going to win a close win over a JFK team that's very talented. But I think Tierney's been there. Done that before. All 3 stops he's been at, whether it's Shaw, Ponchatoula, or West Jeff. So I expect him to win that game. I expect LCA to St. Thomas More to win both their games because right now they're the favorites to appear in the state championship game once again. But moving on to Division III non-select, and he had some really pretty good matchups over here on Division III non-select as well. One of the sneakier brackets, you have Gina and Amy. That's going to be a great one. Gina's an upstart team. They're currently undefeated right now at 11-0. And they play against a very tough Amy team who has talent, and they have a very experienced coaching staff who's been to the Dome and won in the Dome. Then you have Boogaloo and Union Parish. You have 2 fantastic coaches on both sides. and Cyril Crutchfield at Bogalusa, and then Spatafore at Union Parish. Coach Spatafore over there at Union Parish. You have St. James and Manny. Those are two fantastic teams over there. St. James obviously has a lot of talent, led by Kobe Brown and Braden Williams. Manny, they have Tylen Singleton, who's committed to LSU, and they have a very fantastic group of backs as well. And then Pine and Sterlington, two really good running backs on both sides, and James Owens at Pine and Tremel Colvin and Devin Downs at Sterlington. So, who do you have out of these four matchups, and what matchup really intrigues you the most? Because all four of these are really good matchups, Jared.
Yeah, I think these are actually the four quarterfinals that I had picked going into the playoffs. And so it's kind of held up to my expectations so far. I think, as you said, you have some great matchups. That Amit and Gina matchup is a rematch of a second round game a year ago that Amit won to knock out Gina. That Bogalusa and Union Parish matchup of 4-5 is one that I've looked at as kind of an interesting, pivotal, potentially matchup in the quarters. Down at the bottom, Pine is a team that impressed a lot of folks on the North Shore all season long against a Sterlington team that I think a lot of people view as the favorite in this bracket as the 2 seed. But to me, the most intriguing matchup personally is that 3 versus 6 St. James versus Manny. I think that to me is two of the top 3 or 4 state championship contenders in this bracket, in my estimation. And so to see them meet in the quarters down in beautiful downtown Vacherie is going to be a lot of fun on Friday night.
Yeah, and I mean that St. James Manny matchup is the one that really sticks out to me the most. I mean, you can say, well, it's a 3-6 matchup. It's like, well, I mean, if you think about it, these teams usually been 1 or 2 in previous years. I mean, St. James, they most recently won a state championship in 2019, if I'm correct. They had Savion Jones. Am I correct about that, Jared? I think that's about right.
I'm trying to remember the year. It was about then, though.
Yeah, I think it was 2019 where they won when they had Savion Jones. I know they won one when they had Savion Jones. I know that for a fact. I think it was 2019.
Yeah.
And then
yeah,
Manny,
it was. You're right.
Yeah, and then Manny, they won. They're the defending Division III non-select state champs, and I think this is their 3rd or 4th straight. They have a chance to make it to the 3rd or 4th straight state championship game. So they've had a lot of success over there in Central Louisiana. And then also, I think Pine Sterlington is one that kind of sticks out too. I think a lot of people are kind of sleeping on Pine. Pine has some great talent over there. I think they're one of the biggest sleepers in the state because nobody. I think if you told, "Hey, where's Pine High School?" a lot of people would guess Franklinton, Louisiana. I mean, I didn't even know Pine even existed, and I've been covering this for about the last few years. So, that's a very intriguing matchup. But all of these games, I think Gina is going to be Amy. I think Gina. I think they're just hot right now, even as talented as Amy is. And Amy has a little bit more experience than Gina does in terms of his coaching staff, in terms of going to the playoffs and winning it. I think Gina's going to pull it off, and because I think Derek Jones is going to prove once again why he's one of the top running backs in the state. I have Union Parish being Bogalusa. I think that game's going to be close, but I think Union Parish is going to pull it out and make it to, I believe, their 3rd or 4th straight. I know it's their 3rd straight semifinals appearance, but I'm not sure if it's their 4th. But they've had a lot of success the last few years. I think they're going to keep it rolling, especially with a running back like Jamarion Island. I think St. James is going to be Manny. I think I have St. James going to the semifinals. Well, they'll play Sterlington, and that will be an intriguing matchup in the semifinals if everything works out, of course. But moving on to Division III select, I think this is the one bracket I think is the number one bracket in my opinion, just because of how talented these teams are. And it is shown from some of the upsets happened in this bracket. You have St. Charles and Notre Dame, 2 of the most historic programs in the state. St. Charles is hoping to make it to win their 3rd straight state championship game, but they have to get there through Notre Dame, who's led by Louis Cook, who most recently won his 400th game in their first playoff game against Green Oak. So congrats to Coach Louis Cook once again. U High will play Lake Charles College Prep. Lake Charles College Prep is, they've been one of the Cinderella teams this playoffs too. They defeated Pope John Ball 2 by 3 or 4 touchdowns, 34-7 in the first round. And then the last round, they defeated a very good Catholic New Iberia team. And Lake Charles has a lot of talent as well, even though they're the 21st seed. Don't let the seeding fool you. They're a very talented team as well. They will travel to Baton Rouge to hopefully make another upset when they play U High. Isidore Newman will play Episcopal. Episcopal upset Bunkie last week, 38-14, and they hopefully will make it to semifinals. And they have the talent to do so. I'm not sure if they can, but they have two fantastic running backs, Reed Chovan and Braden George. And then you also have Parkview Baptist and Calvary Baptist. Parkview, I've always thought was one of the sleeper teams in this bracket. But they have a very tough matchup with Calvary Baptist, who I think is a top 3 team in the state pound for pound. So, Jerit, what matchup sticks up to you the most? Where do you see maybe an upset happening? And then who you have out of these 4 games?
Yeah, I think the most intriguing matchup to me in this bracket for the quarterfinals is that Parkview versus Calvary Baptist matchup up in Shreveport. That I think there's the potential to see a lot of points scored in that one. I thought it would be Dunham getting Parkview back from their earlier season matchup, but Parkview takes care of business and advances. And I was excited about the potential Dunham Calvary rematch from a year ago. And I'm pretty excited about the Parkview Calvary matchup that we get instead. But I see the higher seeds winning all of these. I like Calvary to take care of business at home. And moving up the bracket, Isidore Newman, I had picked Bunkie to advance, but wasn't going to be surprised, Bunkie or Episcopal, which one of them made the quarters. But I thought Newman would get the best of that matchup either way, and think that holds true, that the Greenies head to the semis again. That Lake Charles College prep team is a team that has been through pretty ridiculous amount of adversity this year, with lost loved ones left and right, a lot of guys missing a lot of time with illnesses. They had a teammate who was shot in the leg and missed time, and so they were kind of wrapping their minds around a lot of that. And talking to Eric Franklin Jr., he said he feels like that kind of galvanized them and has played a huge role in them playing so together these last couple of weeks to push this thing to the quarters. But all that said, while I think they have been better and will be better than folks expected going into the playoffs, that U High is just so talented and so deep on both sides of the ball. And so I have a tough time seeing the Blazers getting past this one. And then Notre Dame and Louis Cook have had some games through the years where they surprise a lot of people, and they win some games that people don't give them a lot of credit for. But so, I mean, you can't rule them out ever, but I think St. Charles, that top seed in their final year before making the jump to 4A, the Comets have been kind of that same story as well. They win games that people don't expect them to win. And this year they are looking quite strong once again and get home field the day after Thanksgiving. And I think that they advance and give us a U High St. Charles Catholic semifinal that a lot of us are eager to see.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think as talented as Lake Charles Prep is, I just don't think they have enough talent to defeat that U High team that's been red hot ever since they lost to Rummel. I mean, they beat Catholic in the first time in maybe it's been a little while since they beat Catholic. I know that when talking to Seth Gale, one of his goals was to be Catholic because he's never beaten Catholics, and he's been there forever because U High is a K through 12 school, so these guys have been going to those type of games forever, and they've never seen U High be Catholic. But so U High's just been red hot. I expect St. Charles Catholic to defeat Notre Dame, but it honestly wouldn't shock me if Notre Dame won because the last few years these games have been close. I mean, I think the last 3 or 4 years or whatever, I think they've met each other in the semifinals, and it's either St. Charles or Notre Dame that's won that game, and it's always these two teams are very familiar with each other, so it wouldn't shock me if Louis and the boys pulled up that upset. I expect Calvary to defeat Parkview Baptist. I think Parkview, as talented as they are, and they have a pretty good quarterback in Abram Johnston. They have a pretty deep receiving core, 2 really good running backs in Caden Turio and Mason Warren. I just think that Calvary is just a little bit bigger than they are, and they have more depth. And it's hard to go up against a Calvary team that has a one of the best running backs in the country, and James Simon. Then you have his brother John, who's also a fantastic receiver. He's committed to La Tech. And there's just talent all around. I think just too much for Parkview. I expect Newman to defeat Episcopal. I think Newman is just better overall, and I think just have the quarterback advantage and the coaching advantage over Episcopal. As great as Coach Travis Portugal is, I think that his issue has been that he's never really gone over the hump. Like once they get the quarterfinals, that's when the dream stops. But I think Episcopal can do enough to defeat Newman, but I just think that there's some areas on Episcopal's team where Newman will just completely stop them, including on the outside, especially with the receivers and cornerbacks. But yeah, moving on to the next bracket, we have Division IV non-select, and so I think there's some pretty good matchups too over here. I mean, I think there's another bracket where a lot of people just don't look at just because it's Division IV, but they have some pretty good teams over here as well. You have Logansport and Welsh. That should be a tricky matchup between a 1 and 8 seed. You have Jerit and Haynesville, Oak Grove and Mangum. Oak Grove is the defending Division IV non-select state champion, and they're led by Jackson Bradley, who's a fantastic quarterback his own right, a La Tech commit, and then Homer and Kentwood. And that's a very intriguing, even though I never would expect it to be a 2-7 matchup. That's a matchup we expected to be like a 1-4 or a 2-3 matchup in the semifinals, but we get it around earlier. So, Jerit, what matchup intrigues you the most? And does this really shock you that all 8, we have the top 8 seeds moving on to the quarterfinals?
No, these are the 8 that I picked to start the playoffs. And anytime that I'm doing a bracket prediction and end up with the top 8 seeds, I'm always questioning myself right off the bat of how are we actually going to get chalk. But this is what I thought it would be, and this is where we're at. And so I'm kind of sticking with my pre-playoff predictions in terms of who's going to win these games on Friday as well. The top matchup to me is that Homer and Kentwood matchup that you just mentioned, the 2 and 7. That's the one I'm most excited about this weekend in Division IV non-select. And I have Kentwood, the higher seed, advancing. I have Oak Grove, the champions from a year ago, as you mentioned, advancing as the 3 seed. I have Haynesville ending this really nice Jerit run, who that's a team that, for Coach Cliff Paul and company out there, that was a team that was 0-10 2 years ago and is now in its first quarterfinal since 1990. And so they've done a hell of a job rebuilding that program in a hurry. But to go up to Haynesville on Black Friday and come away with a win is going to be a pretty difficult challenge for a team that's had to kind of scrape out some wins the last couple of weeks. So I think Haynesville advances, and I think top seeded Logansport as well up at the top of the bracket advances and sets up a nice Logansport Haynesville rematch from a crazy dome game a few years back.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with you there. I think Logansport pulls it off of a Walsh. I wouldn't expect I wouldn't be shocked if Walsh beat Logansport because Walsh is a pretty good team in their own right, but I expect Logansport to win that game. And I think they will meet up with Haynesville, like you said. I think Haynesville just has a little bit more experienced coach staff and experienced team overall than Jerit, who made his first quarterfinals appearance. I think since either it was like 1990. It was like the last time they went to the quarterfinals. So it's been a little while since that program's gone this far. So I expect Haynesville to win to go to the semifinals. I like Oak Grove to beat Mangum. I think Oak Grove I think there's just too much firepower with Jackson Bradley, who can not only throw the ball deep as well, but he can run. I mean, he's a 6'4" freak. I mean, there's a reason why he's committed to La Tech. And to be honest with you, I wouldn't be shocked if he just got bigger offers over time, just because he's one of those guys you just can't teach his size and speed and talent, And then also I expect Kentwood to defeat Homer. And that Kentwood, Oak Grove, everything works out. And let's say both those teams win the quarterfinals. That Oak Grove Kentwood game will be one of the top matchups in the state. And it will be played right here in Southern Louisiana too. So if you're in Southern Louisiana, might as well go to that game because that's going to be a very intriguing matchup. Moving on to our last bracket we're going to cover is Division IV Select. There's been some new. I mean, there's some pretty good matchups in here as well. You have Vermilion Catholic, Ascension Catholic. Ascension Catholic just put up 77 points over poor Opelousas Catholic with Chad Elsie running for 461 yards, 8 touchdowns, and he also had two receptions for 55 yards and then another touchdown. And then it's just a ridiculous performance by him. One of the all-time performances in playoff history, in my opinion, in the state of Louisiana. Then you have a rematch of Riverside and St. Martin's Episcopal. Again, we both went to actually. Washtenaw Christian and St. Mary's is another intriguing matchup. Washtenaw Christian, of course, is the defending Division IV Select State champ. And then you'll also have Central Catholic and Southern Lab. And Southern Lab is probably one of the harder teams in the state. So, Jerit, who do you like out of these matchups? What's a matchup that intrigues you the most? And do you see Vermilion Catholic getting knocked off by Central Catholic? Because I think a lot of people had Ascension Catholic knocking off Vermilion.
Yeah, I think these are some fun matchups. Most of them are, I think, what I had viewed coming into the playoffs, including that Ascension Catholic and Vermilion Catholic game that to me is most intriguing this weekend. You mentioned everything Chad Elsie did behind that big offensive line this past weekend. That's a team that to start the playoffs, I thought could give Vermilion Catholic trouble. And so watch out for that quarterfinal. I took Vermilion Catholic to win that, to start the playoffs. I'm going to stick with that to win at home the day after Thanksgiving, but that's one that is not going to surprise me, even as fantastic as VC has been all year. A well-deserving top seed, an undefeated team thus far. And I think they get by what is a really tough matchup. I think that Riverside and St. Martin's game is one that is likely a lot closer than the regular season matchup, where I know St. Martin's was pretty banged up, particularly in the trenches and trying to heal up a little bit. But I think Riverside comes out on top again and advances to the semifinals. Ouachita Christian, I think, is the top team in my perspective in this bracket. And I think that they take care of business against a good St. Mary's team. And Central Catholic is one that I didn't originally project to be in the quarters. I had St. Fred's getting to this point, but talking to Brock Prejean of Vermilion Catholic, he warned me Central Catholic has the potential to beat anybody in this bracket, and so we've seen that they've pushed on to the quarters. But I think that's where it ends for them, coming to Baton Rouge to face a super talented Southern Lab team with multiple Power 5 commits.
Yeah, you know what? I had Opelousas. Not Opelousas. I had Central Catholic defeating Vermilion Catholic since the brackets were released. I really like Central Catholic and Chad Elsie. I mean, every week they just seem to be doing something out of the ordinary, and I expect that to continue in the playoffs. And I mean, they're in very familiar territory because last year they were the 10th seed and made it all the way to the semifinals, ultimately losing to Ouachita Christian. So I expect them to make another run, and this time to the state championship, in my opinion. Then I think Riverside will beat St. Martin's again. I think Riverside kind of came up with a blueprint how to defeat St. Martin's. And the thing about St. Martin's is that they only run 3 plays, which is hand the ball off to Harlan Berry, the quarterback keeps it, or Harlan Berry takes the snap and runs it out of the walk at quarterback. I think that's not really the formula of success when it comes to Division IV playoffs, because there's a lot of good coaches in Division IV Select. Ouachita Christian has Stephen Fitzhugh. Riverside has one of the top younger coaches in Lee Brissell. And then Southern Labs has a fantastic coach as well, and Coach Asbury. So, and Brock Prejean, of course, of Vermilion Catholic. So I think that type of game plan won't be that successful when it comes to playoff time. But, I wouldn't be shocked to St. Martin's beat Riverside. I expect Ouachita Christian to make the semifinals again with a matchup with Southern Lab. And although as sound as Central Catholic is, I just don't think they have enough to defeat Southern Lab, who has been one of the harder teams in the state. And to be honest, they should be 10-0. They should have beat Madison. I was there for their game against Madison Prep, and really they should have beat Madison Prep. And they've shown that they could beat anybody because they defeated Dunham by 2 touchdowns. So I really like Southern Lab in that matchup. And Southern Lab was actually my pick to win the Division IV Select State Championship. But any final thoughts, Jerit, before we wrap it up?
No, I think we hit on a lot of it, man. I think there are some great matchups in the quarterfinals that are state championship caliber, and I think they set up that many more state championship caliber matchups in the semis next week. And so these final 3 weeks of Louisiana high school football are going to be a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, guys. Thanks for joining us. This is another episode of Protect the Boot. This is Grant Chachere. That's Jerit Roser of Louisiana versus all y'all. Make sure to follow him on Twitter on both his accounts, Jerit Roser and Louisiana versus all y'all, for any updates involved in high school, not only high school football, but just for high school sports and college sports as well. And also follow. Make sure to follow his YouTube page as well. Subscribe to his YouTube page. So, anyways, happy Thanksgiving, y'all, and we'll see y'all next weekend.